Welcome back to Mirror's Signal podcast. Today we are joined by Sarah Hall from Teesside Driving Academy and Sarah Hall Motorsport. In today's episode, Sarah talks about her qualifying process and how her experience in the motorsport world has helped her become a driving instructor and some of the skills that she gained there and how they help her delivering lessons now. We cover a lot of different topics. There's also quite a few questions that were raised through the episode. So I'd be interested to hear your feedback in the comments. If you're enjoying the episode, please make sure that you give it a like. Also, make sure that you are subscribed to the YouTube channel so that you don't miss any episodes as they go live. And you can also share if you think any of the episodes will benefit anyone. If you're currently watching on YouTube, you can also listen to the episodes and they're available on the YouTube Music app. For any further information, you can also head to the Facebook page or the Facebook group, and they're both available on Mirror's Signal podcast. I hope you enjoy this episode. Sarah, how are you doing?
I'm great, thanks. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you very much. And thank you for coming on and chatting with me. I
Thanks for
appreciate
having
it.
me. No worries.
So, for people that don't know who you are, can you give us a little information about you, please?
Like this bit.
Straight on.
Straight to it. So, I guess quite obviously ADI for two years now, and a lot of the rest of my working life and social life really is around cars and motorsport and racing and driving. So, I've got quite a unique mix of interests, really.
So, was that what led you to be a driving instructor? What happened there? How do you go from racing to teaching people how to drive?
Weirdly, I think it was a bit of a natural progression. So I race as a hobby. That's not paid. Unfortunately, I'm not that good to get paid to do it. But yeah, that's a hobby. And my work life up till this point has always been within motorsport or the automotive industry in some way. Um, and I guess I'd always toyed with the idea of becoming an instructor and never really pursued it for whatever reason. There's probably some self doubt there, and I don't know really. It's just one of those unattainable kind of things that floats in the back of your mind. And actually, being freelance in the industry anyway, I work for different car manufacturers, doing specialist driving training and other bits and bobs. I'm really involved with it anyway, and I like the training side. I liked that coaching side of what I do. So when COVID came around, which seemed forever ago, um, basically, as a lot of self-employed people at the time, all my work disappeared overnight. And I was left sat there going, okay, now what? And it just made me realise that as much as I enjoy it, what I'm doing is quite a fragile part of the industry. And I wanted something else. I couldn't put my finger on it. I just wanted a little bit of something else. I did a slightly different direction. I didn't want to stop doing what I was doing, but I just wanted to expand a little bit on what I was able to offer and build my own skill, really. So I decided to finally take a look into it, and yeah, eventually went for it.
So, how was your training to become a driving instructor? I know we've spoke before, and it was maybe a slightly different route, but
Yeah,
how was that, the qualifying process?
it was difficult. I don't cope well with exam conditions. I just don't enjoy any part of it. Nerves, the anxiety, I could absolutely do without it. But it's part of it. You can't escape. Um, Theory, fine. I mean, the only thing I struggled with was the hazard perception videos. I can't play computer games as it is. And to me, I've got a real issue with those hazard videos. I don't think they're particularly fit for purpose, but that's a whole other subject on the side. Um, but did the theory and then looked at arranging part two. That's when it got very difficult for me because I didn't want to go with a national school. I wanted to be fairly independent in the way that I did things. And I think when you go into that, not really knowing a lot about it, not understanding how to qualify and the different routes that you've got available, I think it's really difficult because there is some information out there on the Gov website, but it's a little contradictory on some of it. And it doesn't fully explain what you need to do. And so I ended up basically teaching myself. As far as the part two went, I was fairly confident in my driving because of the other work that I do. However, very much willing to take some criticism and, make sure I was at the level I needed to be at. So I booked an assessment with an instructor, basically, from the local area and said, just, annihilate my driving, please. Get the notepad out, tell you everything I'm doing wrong, what should I be doing right, and why. So we did that, and there was a couple of things to just be mindful of, but generally I was quite happy with that. And then, of course, I had to decide, where do I go from here? And without having that peer group, there's no office full of people doing the same job as you. It's quite tricky to navigate unless you've got people around you that can say from experience, look, we did this or I did this and these are your options. So I found that really, really difficult. So basically studied and taught myself as much as I possibly could, although I had been doing driver coaching in other ways. So some of that side of it was there. It's more understanding the way the DVSA want things to be taught and done and their standards. And then I ended up thinking, right, okay, I need some help with this. So what do I do? And I ended up getting in touch with, on a recommendation, an instructor from a nearby area, and spent a few hours with her coaching me for the part three, which was brilliant. So valuable time in car with her. And it went for my part three, basically. So a little unorthodox, but I got there in the end.
So I'm assuming you didn't go on a PDI license, you done a bit of training with someone and then went for your part three. How did you manage that, getting a student for your part three? How did that happen?
After lots of consideration and sort of hours of research and everything else to try and work out what was the best way to do it, I ended up taking a full license holder for my part three. And actually, I already instructed full license holders in performance driving and stuff like that, so that I was comfortable with that. And actually, I was thinking, should I do that? Should I not? But there was nothing to say that you couldn't. It was absolutely allowed. And I thought, well, that's where my experience is. So why not play to that strength? And actually, it obviously worked really well. I did actually fail my first part three by 2 points. Serious. But in all honesty, as frustrating and actually I was quite upset about it at the time because I wasn't happy with how my part three was marked. However, putting that issue aside, it's not actually surprising that I failed the first one because of my almost lack of training. I've got to be realistic about that and hold my hands up and say, would I recommend somebody to do it the way I did? And probably not for most people. Like I said, I felt like I was, halfway is probably generous, but I felt like I was, for want of a better phrase, halfway there because I already instructed people in car. So I had some of the elements there already. So that's a massive factor in why I didn't go on the pink license, because when I weighed up the cost options and time scale, I thought, well, am I just going to be going over stuff I've already learned by doing it that way? I want to kind of skip those bits. I know how to do that bit. Let's build me from this point where I already am, because I wasn't going into it blind. I think if somebody was going into it completely brand new and not done any of that sort of stuff before. Take as much as you can. Yeah, hindsight's great, but I don't regret doing it the way I did. It was, yeah, there was just pros and cons to the way I did it.
So that's interesting because you have got experience teaching full license holders.
Yeah.
So that's kind of your background. How did you find then? So you've done your part three, passed your part three. How did you find teaching learners from scratch?
So I did have a little bit of experience with learners because I worked at a stunt experience school in my area, and as well as the crazy stunt stuff, on the quiet, relaxed days, we could actually take, because it was private land, learners for age 14 up. So we did do a little bit of that. There was absolutely stuff I needed to build on, and absolutely stuff that I couldn't teach in that role because we weren't on the road. But as far as beginning somebody, they've never sat in a car or they've never sat in a driver's seat, they've never touched a pedal before. That sort of stuff was okay. I enjoyed that. I found that really, really rewarding, all of those first time lessons. Um, and out on the road, the biggest difference for me was understanding what that student was thinking. And that was the biggest learning point for me, was getting inside their head, because as we know, or as you can even imagine, they're going to be very overwhelmed. They're suddenly in a seat of responsibility. They're trying to learn how to operate the machine and see what's going on around them. So getting in their head and understanding the fact that we're out on the road now. I'm not just teaching them in a controlled environment anymore where they're not worrying about other traffic. Suddenly things are going on, things are happening. And yeah, for me, understanding that actually they have zero awareness, zero planning until they've learned it. So starting that from scratch, I thought was actually really challenging. It was fun at times, just trying to like analyze them and get them to, yeah, see what's going on around as well as control the car. That was definitely a new element.
I can imagine it's a different challenge to maybe being on a track, like you say, or a controlled environment, and maybe a bit of a learning curve there.
Mm.
But moving on to when the students get more experienced, I guess, and something that I'm interested in talking to you about is your background. You said there about performance driving and what you've been up to. How has that helped you as an instructor? Do you feel that that's put you in a better position when you're teaching students?
I would say definitely. There's a lot of transfer of skill. Yes, they're completely different things, but there's still elements of both within each other. They're just used in a slightly different way. So for me, understanding how a vehicle handles and the vehicle dynamics at higher speed and some of the basic mechanics that I've got experience with within that as well, that really gives me a lot of understanding of what's happening to the car I'm sat in with the learner. So it makes me more comfortable in understanding from a safety aspect what is too fast. For example, it doesn't make me then sit there as a first time road instructor going, oh, what speed should we approach that corner at? I don't know if they're comfortable. You know, I know what's safe, and I would be a million miles away from basically losing grip. Like on a track, you're pretty much on the knife edge of have I got grip or haven't I got grip. Um, it's quite a novelty in a way, and almost a slower pace on the road to not be constantly on that knife edge of a safety aspect, if that makes sense. Um, Everything on the road, despite things happening really quickly, it's in a different way because you're not traveling as fast, yes, stuff around you happens really quickly. So you've got to be aware of that. But you're not moving as fast. So you've got time to deal with things. And hopefully you have plenty of time to deal with it and not get yourself in a sticky situation. Whereas higher speed performance stuff, especially on a track, obviously if it goes wrong, you're in a different scenario altogether.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
So something I've been told, and it'd be interesting to get your opinion on it, to help me improve as an instructor, improve my own driving.
Yeah.
And from the sounds of it, you're coming to this with quite a high level of driving. Do you think it's helped you as an instructor now because you've got, I guess, you know the levels of the car, but are there any other aspects that you think it would give you an advantage because you've come from that background?
Yeah, definitely. And I probably annoy everyone around me because I'm always telling everybody to do advanced driving courses. And I don't necessarily mean the performance side of it, just advanced road driving does every single person out there a world of good. I think it depends on the driver because even as instructors, you've got a whole array of ability of driving. And realistically, we've all passed a test, so we should all be safe. And really that's the minimum. But have we got mechanical sympathy? Have we got excellent planning and awareness? They're the two things I think that set a good instructor apart from a really, really great one, aside from the teaching element. So yes, I think there's definitely parts of my own driving experience that have really helped me. You just get a better understanding of what's happening, and I think it's an appreciation as well. If your own standard isn't amazing, how can you expect anyone that you're teaching to be anywhere near amazing? And maybe some people don't teach people to be amazing, but I try to. If they're anywhere near it, then I've done my job. I don't want them to scrape a pass. I want them to be really good, and not because just of their car control. I want their awareness to be good. I want them to be a good driver, and that's not just about the control factor, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. That tends to be one of the bigger challenges for me. It's one thing mechanically operating a car, making it go, making it stop.
Yeah,
It's the anticipation, the
yeah,
forward planning. That's the bit that I find takes up a lot of time. It's like, great, we can drive, but if the situation changes, are you aware enough to adapt
yeah.
almost instantly to what's going on
Mm-hmm.
around you?
Yeah. And I find that it can be hard to teach because when you've got, well, I don't know, there's two sides to this. When you've got a learner, they're fresh, they don't have the bad habits yet, most of them. So if you can teach them that standard from the beginning, then you're onto a winner. But at the same time, it's sometimes a lot to expect from somebody when obviously they're going to follow parents, for example, or whoever else they drive around with as a passenger, who've all got bad habits, because that is just human nature. We just get complacent in what we're doing. And when you look at the standard of driving out on the road at the moment, it's atrocious, is the most polite way I can put it. How can we expect learners to have that awareness factor and anticipation and stuff like that when the experienced folk out there don't have it? It's such a tricky one.
It does become a challenge. Now you've mentioned it as well, because we're sat in the car trying to teach best practice and maybe demonstrate and point out the good things. But for as many good things I see on the road, you see someone doing something that they shouldn't. And it's
Yeah.
almost like we're teaching them to drive how they should. And I guess they're probably sat there thinking, well, why is no one else driving like this?
Yeah, yeah. Why is no one else sticking to 30? Yeah, why is no one else? Yeah, why is no one else indicating there? Um, yeah, and all we can do is do the best we can
Yeah.
with that one person in that scenario. And I'll use it a lot if we see people do it. Or the student might not notice they've done something wrong, but I have the car in front, the car over there. Um, I'll use it as a talking point, and it's good to get them chatting. But actually, it's making them question what everyone else is doing. Is that right? Why is it not right? What could they do differently? What's the risk? And it creates a conversation too. I try not to dwell because honestly, if you talk about every wrong thing that a driver did, that'd be the entire lesson. And plus, you don't want it to be just a negative, like slating every other driver on the road. But certain activities or certain manoeuvres and stuff, you can definitely talk about and get them thinking.
It certainly, from my point of view, does get them thinking when there's
Mm.
something that's obvious and out there and we're like, what could have gone wrong? And I find linking it to certain things that we've done as well, if we've maybe
Yeah.
come into a situation too quick and
Mm.
then this other person that we saw, it's like if those two situations meet, then it's a completely different story. But then you've got the other side as well, haven't you? You've got the good driving, you've got when people see the L plates and they give us space and
Mm.
they allow us to do our thing. So I
Yeah,
think it's good highlighting both. And then
definitely.
hopefully, my thought is that in 5, 10 years' time, when they've passed and they've been driving, they're doing the same to future
Yeah,
learners.
I'd
But
love
like you
to think.
said, people build bad habits.
Of course, and it's human nature, isn't it? We get used to doing an activity, we stop seeing the risk because we're now comfortable with it. So that suddenly 70 doesn't feel terrifying when it did when you were trying to learn, or it did when you first passed, and 10 years down the line, 70's a breeze. So I think it's always going to be that way, which is why I don't agree with the fact that we can just pass and then never get looked at ever again. Um,
I
yeah,
think that's another topic in
that's
itself.
another topic.
Yeah, and I agree with that as well. I mean, we can't get tests for like just once in your life. We can't get a test for that at
Yeah,
the minute. Could you imagine if they brought in once every 10 years?
no. I think the system definitely needs a shake up, but
Mm. Yeah,
it's there's nothing, that there seems to be an examiner shortage. That seems to be part of the problem. And in all honesty, when I've seen some of the positions advertised, you can earn more as an instructor. And also, the examiner role is a completely different training course and controversial time. How good an examiner can you be if you've never been an instructor? There's a question to everyone else. Because I'd like to hear people's opinions on that. I'm not saying it can't happen. I just think it's a really interesting point that racing, for example, you can't be a racing instructor until you have X amount of experience as a racing driver. It seems logical. But on the road, we don't have that same standard. And I think there's a little bit of a divide between examiners and instructors. Not everywhere, not for everyone, but on the whole, when you look at the topics discussed on like driving instructor forums and stuff, there's a real kind of animosity going on. And I just think it's really interesting because we should be on the same team. We are on the same team, right? So I think that's, yeah, an interesting one.
it is. And we'll see what comments we get if anyone's listening to
Yeah.
this. Let's hear your thoughts on to be an examiner. Should you be an instructor first? But I guess there's the other side to that as well, because I like playing devil's advocate. I just
Yeah.
agree with
Yeah. Yeah.
everyone. Would it make sense if we knew a little more about becoming an examiner because
Definitely.
we're preparing our students to go and sit with someone if we've got no understanding of what they do?
So definitely. Yeah.
Interesting.
Can we get hold of marking sheets to see what they're ticking off? Yeah. There is information out there, but it's not very comprehensive, in my opinion, for an instructor, especially first time taking someone for a test. I don't know about everyone else, but I was more nervous than she was. I didn't tell her that. But just the whole experience, and you see the negative stuff on some of the groups, and I didn't have an amazing time with my part three myself. So there is a bit of a nervousness about going to a test centre on occasion. It might depend on the test centre. So I think to have a much better understanding of each other's roles, I think would be really important and really beneficial. I think it's one thing for an examiner to be able to mark a learner on their test. But don't forget, these examiners also pass or fail us as ADIs. My question is, how can you be, what's the correct word? I don't know. The expert in marking a pass or fail of an ADI when you've never been one to understand. It follows on from that question. I just find it really interesting.
See, I know some of our examiners down here are ex-ADIs. I don't know if they all are. I don't know. I also know that we can have, well, we've got access to the marking guide that they use and kind of the statistics on where people are failing and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of publications can also come down to interpretation, can't they? Because you see from one area in the country to another, there's people, my student failed for this, and my students don't. So there is interpretation I expect in each test centre. So each test centre is consistent. I've spoke to examiners, we've had them on the show, and they do stay as consistent as they can. But is that going to be carried across the board? And then how do we understand it all? There's some interesting questions there.
Yeah.
I wish I could have the answer. Maybe I'll get another examiner on it at some
Yeah,
point and
that's
throw
it.
them there. But it's an interesting thought that you've got there, that maybe there should be more overlap
They
between
should.
the two. I
Yeah.
think there should. I think we should work together
Yeah.
opposed to us and them. I'm not saying that I'd go on a salary for the DVSA, but at least know what we're doing.
Yeah, I think a bit of understanding would be so beneficial to both sides. I think imagine what a good position an examiner is in if they were an ADI. Just that level of understanding is just, it's just different. Is it necessarily better? Potentially, but not for everyone. I think it is a really odd subject in a way. You could have an amazing, very fair examiner that's never been an ADI, but they might be extremely good at what they're doing and very consistent and fair and everything else. It's always going to be varied. There's just, a whole walk of people involved. So there's always going to be differences.
So we're going to be raising more questions than answers in this episode.
I think it sounds like it, doesn't it? But that's all right. That's good. Questions are good.
It is. Everyone can ponder on it and they can, I don't know, leave a comment and we'll figure out some answers together. But on that topic then, so we've mentioned about we can form bad habits over time and understanding the marking.
Yeah.
Can we go back to your part two? How did you find the training? Was there any changes that you needed to make and the actual part two itself?
I won't say I found it easy. It wasn't the most difficult thing I've done because I've done advanced courses and stuff like that, which obviously are more in depth, but it was probably one of the most nervous times. Just to my own nature, as soon as I know it's an exam, I just crumble. I'm terrible. So yeah, I definitely felt the pressure and the nerves and the stress and everything else. So I didn't enjoy it by any stretch. I mean, realistically, if I remember any tidying up, really, there was a couple of tidying up. I was a little bit lazy with my indicator on a couple of occasions. Slightly late was my main takeaway from when I sort of seeked out a little bit of an assessment. And really, as much as I passed my part two with relative ease, I actually really annoyed myself. I let myself down. I didn't know the area, so I went to scout the area first to see if there was any horrendous pieces of road around. And it was all straightforward. It was fine. Went back for the part two, and I, obviously not knowing the area, went in an incorrect lane on a roundabout. I corrected it safe enough. There actually was not a single car around me. So I just nipped into the correct lane, after doing my observations, everything else, and carried on. And I got a mark down for that, which bugged the life out of me. This is where I think the whole system should have a shake up, really, because is it a real life scenario that you take the wrong lane at a roundabout? We do it all the time. We're human beings, right? If you're expected to drive for an hour ish, you're going. There's going to be small things that you do wrong. So it got me thinking about it. And did I correct it? And did I correct it correctly and safely? Yes. So I'll take the mark. It is what it is. It's still a pass, right? But we're always trying to achieve perfection out. That's the problem. So we take it not personally as such, but we're always striving for that clean sheet. But is there a point in those sort of markdowns? If it's got you into a pickle, your decision making, then it needs looking at. If it's something that can be rectified without affecting another road user, then what's the point in marking people down for it? Same with learners, because I just don't see the need for that negative. It's sometimes a bit picky, but maybe people will disagree.
I don't get it if everything's done safe, apart from
Yeah.
maybe the planning and looking ahead. I don't know. It's an odd one because you're right. If you've not affected anyone and you've done your checks and you're in the correct lane, what's the issue? I think it's easier for me because I did I think I picked up a couple more driver faults on my part two. So I can't worry about one because I think I made two or three. So it's like,
Oh, I got 3 or 4, I think.
did you?
Yeah, that was the only. I don't know what the other ones are. They were so insignificant, and I didn't get
Oh, it's
this
just that one that
one
gets you.
just because it got me thinking. What is the point of the marking process? What is the point of the part two? It's to make sure that I'm at that standard and that I'm safe first and foremost. And like I say, if that decision making, bearing in mind people don't know the area, and actually I will defend myself because I can go back and show you it. I can take other marks all day long because I'll go, fair enough, I was a bit late doing that, or whatever the wrong. But that one bugged me because it was very misleading roundabout. The lanes weren't great in the way they were laid out in comparison, the sign. And all you've got on approach is the sign until you get a bit closer and obviously you can see the lanes. So basically it took me off. It said right at the roundabout, so I was going right at the roundabout. And actually the right lane then split into two. But the first arrows were incorrect. The middle lane said it didn't go that way, but actually when you got around them, suddenly that arrow changed. So I ended up, correcting it because there's no one there. So it wasn't a biggie. It just started to make me think, where do you stop with it? Because for me, you've got to be realistic with it, which is why they've introduced stuff like sat navs, because it's realistic as to what that person is going to be doing when they actually get out there driving. So can we expect perfection? Should there be all this focus on clean sheets all the time for all the learners? Yeah, I think it should be better.
It's an interesting thought. And I took my part two somewhere that I'd never been before.
Hmm.
And thinking back, it probably helped me a little bit because I had to be on it. I
Yeah.
basically drove up the day before, scoped out the test center, drove out for 5 minutes, drove back, drove a different route for 5 minutes, drove back. And I basically went in every direction I could from the test center for the first
Yeah.
5 minutes. And then that was my studying done for that area. And my thought was, if I know the first 5 minutes, once we get out of those boundaries that I've set myself, I'm going to have calmed down. I'm going to be driving. I'll have relaxed into it. And whatever comes next, we're fine. But I had to be on it, like you were
Mm.
saying about certain signs and things like that. If I'd have done it places that I'm familiar, I might not have been quite as alert
Yeah.
and aware. So I don't know. Again, if people have done a part two in areas they're familiar with, let us know how you found it.
Yeah. Be interesting to see the difference, wouldn't it? If you did get complacent because you knew the area, might you miss things because you're just so comfortable in the surrounding? That's quite a good point.
And it's the test situation that I think that's what I struggled with. It's not the driving. I mean,
Yeah.
I'd fixed a few bad habits as part of my training package before going for my part two. But yeah, it was the nerves that had me worried. And I think that was why I kind of went and checked out the test center the day before
Yeah.
to try and ease them a little bit.
Yeah, that's what I tried to do as well. I knew I'd be up a height all the way there. I wouldn't sleep the night before. I'd just be so nervous. It's ridiculous. But yeah, I think it helps. It's to me, it's good preparation, isn't it? You're trying to give yourself the best scenario. I think if you don't go and check it out at all, yes, okay, you might be an excellent driver, but there might be a naff bit of road that catches you out. Like the roundabout, it wasn't a big deal in my case. It was one mark for planning because I didn't get in the right lane, basically. But that could have been something much worse and could have actually ruined the test. So it was definitely worth checking out the area and making sure yourself the best chance.
And you passed maybe a driver
Not
fault that we're not too happy about. I don't know whether everyone
not
heard you
bitter at
mention it,
all. Yeah, I'm not bitter at all.
but I've not thought of it from that point of view. I have conversations with my students and I try, and this might sound controversial, I try and stay on the side of the examiner. If students have picked up
Yes.
either serious faults, driver faults, whatever the feedback is, I'll always try and justify what the examiner has said.
Yeah.
Because if we've got to go back and do another driving test, the last thing I want with my students is them thinking that there's a bit of a divide between us and them, is my thought process with
Yeah.
it. But as for picking up a driver fault, for being in the wrong lane, then correcting it safely, I think it's a hard argument to
It's difficult. And
justify.
of course, unless you can see exactly what happened, it's so hard to comment on. Or, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, they marked what they thought at the time. It didn't matter. No, pass. It's fine. It's just one of those that I think it's one that will just sit with you a little bit. Something you can hold your hands up and go, okay, yeah, fair play. I didn't do that quite correct. Yeah, I wasn't quite quick enough. And yeah, there's always going to be that little one that just, you know, what was their thought process? And I think that's part of it is understanding what they're looking for. Like why did they mark it like that? And understanding their thought process as well, I think is really useful, whether that's for yourself or whether it's for a student.
Yeah, I'm thinking about I picked up a hesitation, and I know I wouldn't advise this to anyone, but I picked up the car an hour before my part two. So I'd never driven the car before.
Yeah.
And I was on one of the tricky areas within my 5 minutes was a blind junction and it was a right turn. And I hesitated coming out. Someone had stopped to let me out. Someone was coming from the other way. The examiner
Yeah.
was like, "You could have made that." And I was like, "Yeah, but I was scared. And what if I stalled in this car that I've never driven before?"
It's funny, isn't it?
So there are. And I guess there's the buffer as well, isn't it? Because it's not a you've made a mistake, you're done. It's let's see how the rest of the drive goes. So it's interesting to hear your take on the part two. Was it as expected? Was it as a driving test goes for the job that you're now doing as a driving instructor. What do you make of the part two?
I quite like the part two. I think it's the most fit for purpose out of all three of the tests. Um, um, it was what I expected, to be honest. And I don't know whether I've just got more comfortable around that scenario because I've done a test in an HGV, I've done a test as an advanced driver. So compared to those, it was almost easier, but I was the most nervous. But I think it's because what was riding on it, not the driving. It was just that pressure of like, to fail, I have to do it again, and then what if we're out of time for part three, and all that sort of stuff was in my mind. Whereas the others were, it was, what was the end point? It was just you pass or fail that, and there's nothing else riding on those things. Um, but it is exactly as I'd expected, to be honest. Yeah, I just thought it was straightforward.
Nice. So another question for you with your skills and advice from an experienced driver and racing driver and everything else that you do. Are there any kind of common things that people could improve with their driving? So I'd say my driving's all right for a driving instructor. But where could we go, or what things would you advise people improve as part of their driving to enhance their instructor abilities?
I would definitely look at almost any driving experience that you can, because everything to me is about experience and seat time, and the more you do it, the better you'll get. But advanced driving courses, um, going into an advanced driving course for me with my existing experience, I was far from cocky, but did I think I'd learn loads? No, I didn't think I'd learn a lot. I thought, open mind, let's see what happens. I learned loads, absolutely loads by doing the advanced courses. Um, it completely changed my mindset. Did it change how I physically drive the machine? Probably not, no. But as far as my planning and awareness and anticipation, looking ahead, reading other people's body language or car language, because you can't really see the people, you can see the person. All of that sort of stuff is worth its weight in gold. Just being able to be so aware that you can avoid somebody else's mess up. The amount of times that saved me from being in an accident or a collision is astounding, to be honest. Like, and I can't recommend it enough to people. Um, Most of the time, we aren't. Nobody goes out there and thinks, "Oh well, I might crash on the way to Tesco," or I might make a mistake here, and like, we just don't go out with that mindset. You never think it's going to happen to you. Most collisions that anyone is ever involved with, it is usually another driver affecting what you're doing, pulling out in front of you, whatever else the situation might be. We can't say every single situation, but if we can lessen an impact, therefore lessening like damage and lessening the risk to the people in the cars, or avoid it altogether, it's just a no-brainer. It's just a win. But people drive a lot faster now, for various reasons that we can get sidetracked with. But people drive faster, and people also don't look ahead. They're looking at what's happening at the end of their own bonnet, and we're not really looking far enough ahead to plan. And when I do advanced teaching, it is all about, for most people, there's nothing wrong with the way they're driving the car. It's all about getting them to pull their eyes up and look that way, because we don't, as a general. It's like a mindset change that people need, because it is so easy to get frustrated with people's bad driving And it's justifiably so. It's infuriating when people have really terrible driving standards. But the amount of drivers that I work with, and they'll be like, yeah, but if he pulls out, that's not my fault. Right, correct. But if you can do something about it, why would you not? Do you want your car written off? Do you want to be potentially injured or your family injured? Do you want to have 3 hours at the roadside for recovery? Do you want to have to go through insurance and sort all of that out, and it's going to take you 9 months, and then you have to get a hire car and everything else, everything that comes with even a small collision? If you can do something to avoid their error, why would you not? Just save yourself the hassle. You've got to have a bit of sort of zen about you and just, yeah, breathe it in and let it go. Like, yes, it's frustrating. Call them a few names if you want under your breath because they can't hear you in your own car, but then let it go. If you can see their error happening or about to happen, anticipate it and do something about it. Quite a lot of the time, I'll be driving with someone and I'll say, he's going to do that or she's going to do that. How do you know? And they do. They go and do it. They'll pull out. They won't look. Whatever the thing is. So because I'm just on the road that much, that you get to anticipate even people's body language within that car they're driving and how they're behaving. You can kind of preempt it happening. And if it doesn't, great. But if it does, I was already ready. They're not having my bumper today. No.
It's interesting that you mentioned about the kind of attitude towards an accident where if they pull out, it's their fault.
Yeah.
I didn't quite have that attitude, but I've been involved in collisions on the road before I became a driving instructor. But when I was
Yeah.
training for my part two, we got asked off our trainer about that. And I explained the situation. I was like, yeah, it wasn't my fault. It was their fault. They pulled out in front of me on a roundabout. Nothing I could do about it. And after about 5, 10 minutes of good targeted questions, I came away thinking, well, insurance might have paid out, and yeah, it wasn't my fault. But could I have done something to avoid it? Probably. Yeah.
Mm. Well,
And
this is
exactly
it.
that. I might have got annoyed with the drivers that pulled out in front of me,
Of course. Yeah.
but because I'm one of them, it's we're not going to go into it today because it's a boring story, but the car got written off.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was their fault. But I just had it serviced, new tires, new brakes, da, and barely got enough money to cover the cost of like what it had cost me to put into the car. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was their fault, but I'm still out of pocket. So
Yeah.
there's always different angles to look at these things, isn't there?
Well, that's it. And even as daft as it is, I even think about this now. My car insurance, as I'm sure pretty much everyone listening, it has doubled, tripled, whatever. The price has gone ridiculous over the last year or so. Now, for that reason, a lot of us won't have the level of cover that we might have previously had because we've had to make sacrifices on certain things because we're trying to get potentially the cheapest policy or the best slash cheapest for us. So has your policy even got a hire car with it? Because I can tell you, if you get in an accident and you don't have that, you will be lost because you will have to pay. And hire cars are so expensive. And if you win, and if it's 12 months later, etc., by the time it's all gone through the insurance, you might get some of that cost back. But can you afford to outlay that? I think it is a mindset thing, regardless of that. Yes, that driver might make an error, but you know what? There's a difference for me. If driving without due care and attention or driving dangerously, they're two different things. And I think it's very easy, to get frustrated with both of those scenarios. But for example, if you've got a young mother, the kids are in the back, I'm just giving a random scenario here, they're stressing her out because they're screaming and kicking off and everything else that kids do. Because they want to get out of the car and they want to go home and watch Peppa Pig, or I don't know what kids do these days. But that person is stressed. The attention of a parent is not necessarily fully on the road because they're trying to manage children. Now, is that person going to drive perfectly? No, they're probably going to make some errors. It's a concentration thing, isn't it? Now, like, if they pull out in front of me, for example, am I going to be pretty peeved? Yeah, but there's no point me saying, well, I don't need to do anything about it because that's their fault, that's their mistake. Even if it's their mistake, if I crash into the side of their car and I've crashed directly into where a baby's sat, can I live with that? It's that impact that people just don't think about. Like, it is a mindset thing. Do I just want to avoid that scenario altogether? Is he or she driving absolutely terribly? Yeah, I'm going to stay out the way then. It's just so much easier to just not be stressed and just keep out of people's way.
It is a very interesting thought, and
Mm.
I don't know whether it's my age now as I'm getting a little bit older. Not that I'm ancient yet, but I'm not 22, 23 driving around like I was then. So when I do see things like that, it's now, and I guess it's because I've had to put a different light on it for my learners. I'm
Mm.
posing those questions. Are the children distracting the parent? Are
Yeah,
they rushing to school? Is this happening? Is that happening? Because I feel I need to try and manage the situation and keep it zen in the car for my
yeah,
students
yeah,
rather than they shouldn't have pulled out in front of us. Let's beep the horn
yeah.
because
What are you going
that
to
doesn't
achieve?
help anyone.
Yeah, that's the difference. I see more now than I used to. Yeah, I've always been what I would class as an empathetic person, but I feel like I've built on that now that I've done the things that I've done because everybody in those cars out there is a human. They're going through something. We've all got stuff in our lives that might distract us, and we're not perfect. You might have a very confident driver behind or next to whatever, somebody who is not. Now, driving up the backside, driving too close, flying past them over the speed limit. Yes, okay, that's only affecting you, apparently, but it's not. It affects those people around you. And it could still lead to a scenario of if you've got a non-confident person, you could cause them to make another error because of what you're doing. And then suddenly you're caught up in it anyway. Just, keep out the way, sail on by sensibly, and that's it. You're out of the scenario. It's just seeing the risk in situations, and I think planning and awareness of people is the biggest one. Going back to kind of what you asked me a while ago, but also I think people have, on the whole, zero sense of stopping distances, and that is probably one of my biggest like peeves on the road is how close people follow or don't leave themselves time to stop. That bugs me.
There's a lot we can discuss, and
Yeah.
we won't dwell on this anymore. I'm sure as instructors, we've experienced terrible driving, we've experienced great driving.
Yes.
But on what you've mentioned there, so what was the course that you would advise? Did you say any course, or is there anything specific that you've done that you found has helped you?
I did a course with ROSPA, so my local ROSPA group. Um, they have, from what I believe, it's pretty national, and they've got a decent setup there where you can join the local group for a small annual fee, and it's a group of volunteers, and they will basically train you up for free. Don't quote me on that in case it's changed, but I believe that's the case. And if you want just some coaching, great, that's fine. If you want to go ahead and do an advanced certificate, you do have to pay for that at the end. And I don't know the cost of that now, but it wasn't particularly a lot, less than DVSA. And you can get an actual examination and a certificate at the end of that as well, which is very satisfying. For me, that's the way I did it. because I always try to be perfect. And if I'm not, at least I'm decent. But you've got to try and be 100%, haven't you? So yeah, I did that and thoroughly enjoyed it. It did me the world of good. There was just so much within it. They work off roadcraft, which is what the police drivers use. You can get the book, you can get the roadcraft book if you're a reader. Really useful book. I'm not really a reader, I'm more of a practical learner. So I don't flick through books too much, but I still have it on my shelf. So I do look things up every now and again if I've got a question. But yeah, that was fantastic, worth its weight in gold. There are others because you've got IAM and other groups, but I haven't got personal experience with them, but I've heard really good things as well about them from others. So yeah, I would definitely look into anything. You can get other experience things as well, on track and things like that. There's still transferable skills to understanding. Yeah, it's a fun day, but actually, if you can learn a bit of vehicle handling and dynamics, it gives you much more appreciation for things like good tires, checking your car, what your electronics are doing in your car. I do a lot of work on like skid pans and stuff like that. And I love them courses because to get someone in a car and get them to do whatever maneuvers and it's all going swimmingly and they look really confident. And I'm like, right, let's turn traction control off. Let's see if you can do that again. Turn it all off and watch them go like full panic because suddenly it's not working. And actually, it gives them a real appreciation of how much our cars are helping us out at times. And if we didn't have all of, stability and traction and all that sort of stuff, yeah, there'd be some scary situations out there.
I'm going to look into that and I'm going to save
Definitely.
this episode as evidence for my accountant when I put it through his CPD, a track
Yeah,
day.
yeah, too right. Give me a shout. I'll give you some recommendations. But yeah, anything at all to me, anything behind the wheel is really useful. As much as those things, yes, you're not driving like that on the road, but does it give you an appreciation and understanding of what's happening mechanically to that car and your driver inputs? Yes, 100%. But first and foremost, definitely look into an advanced driving course. I just think they're amazing.
I'm hoping people can kind of look into that. And if anyone's done it, it'd be great to hear your thoughts on it as well,
Yeah,
because I've heard it from a lot of people now. I want to do it. I've heard great things about all of it. And I did notice when I was back conscious on my driving, it was almost, I've discussed it on the episode. It's like, part one, past that, forget about it. Part two, past that, forget about it.
yeah.
Part three, now we do the driving instructing. And I think
Mm,
the more I'm now speaking to people, it should all be merged.
yeah,
It all benefits itself. So then I took a look at my driving just myself, and that helped me going forward with some of the lessons. And that's
yeah,
just me being conscious of my driving again.
yeah,
So
yeah.
having someone experienced pointing out the differences and being able to learn and drive at a more advanced level, I can certainly see the benefits of it in my lessons for my students.
Yeah, I'd agree as well with that. I think my own awareness and planning is so much better now than it used to be. And a lot of that is down to doing the advanced course. And to me, that's benefited me so much as a learner instructor because you can easily find yourself in a sticky situation when you're teaching a learner, um, dead end roads and you suddenly start, or whatever it may be. And I think just having that extra awareness, I mean, we all think we're so aware. I did. I thought I was great at awareness until I did my advanced. And suddenly my eyes, and it wasn't a massively critical course of yourself. Like it wasn't because we don't take like criticism very well as humans. We're not great. We're quite defensive, and especially driving is really emotive. So we don't take criticism of driving very positively for a lot of cases. But the course isn't really about that. It's about just building on everything you've already got. And that awareness factor for me was the biggest one. Just being able to look ahead. I just felt so much more relaxed as an instructor and confident because my eyes were just open far wider than they ever were. Yeah, can't recommend it enough.
That was one of the reasons, one of many reasons I failed my first part three. I wasn't really looking far enough ahead. I wasn't looking at my student enough. And then they was just kind of being ambushed with information way too late for them to do anything about.
Mm-hmm.
So even from that, I should have learned back then that maybe I need to be looking further ahead.
I
But
would say
it's
that's probably really common for a lot of us, though,
mm,
because we are probably thinking of a lot of information at once. And actually, the speed at which we're giving the information or the timing, it is right for when we're doing it in our head because we've already thought about it. It's getting into the learner's head, isn't it? And giving it far enough in advance. I found that quite difficult. That's something I've really had to learn is I can commentary drive, no problem. I can tell you what's happening as I'm looking at it all. But that's in my time, not in the students' time. They're much slower at processing it all and they need to think about everything a lot earlier than we do. So yeah, getting that actually it really helped that side of it.
we're covering a lot of ground tonight, aren't we?
Yeah, we are.
What I would like to do now, if we can, is ask you some tell me questions, if you want to do some of that.
Let's do it.
So can you tell me what car you would drive if it was the only car you would drive forever?
The only car forever.
Yeah.
That's very difficult. You're asking a racing driver to pick one car.
Yeah.
Um, I'm just going to go with a car that I want to drive because it's impossible to just choose one. Um, it's a car that I own and I haven't driven it in 5 or 6 years. Yeah, at least. And it's soned and it needs some real TLC. And every time I look at it, it makes me sad because I just want to drive it. So I'm going to choose that, and it is an MGZT Tourer with a V6 in it, and it's quite a cool one because it's limited edition, so it's funky colour. They only ever made 7 of them. It was my pride and joy. Now it's an estate, so it's not a small car, but it's a lovely all round car because it sounds nice. It's like comfy as anything, but for an estate, it's really good handling. Plus, you can load the back full of all sorts of stuff. So I'm going to go with that. I miss it.
I love that. Do you know how many people, not in the situation you are, but go back to a car that they once owned? It's
I'll tell you
interesting.
a, I'll tell you a short, sad fact. I bought back my first ever car. And I mean the actual, not the same model, the car. And I bought it back for £125. And I still have it now. I just don't drive it because I can't afford any more cars on the road. I've got a weird collection if you haven't started to gather this.
I'm slowly piecing that together at the minute.
Yeah.
So what car was that?
Peugeot 306.
Okay.
Last of the good Peugeots. Controversial, I know. Last of the good Peugeots, that one.
So we've got some interesting answers there. I mean, you could have had some bonus ones if you wanted, but
Go on.
you went all in and you've already got the car that sounds like it's quick, sounds good, and is practical. So you've got the best of all worlds with it.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of other options, but yeah, I've just got a real soft spot for that car. It's taken me all over the UK. I've got some lovely memories in it of time with friends and stuff like that. So yeah, and I'd love to have it back on the road. I just don't have the time or the money to fix it up because I've got too many other projects going on. And yeah, it's no good. It's an
I'm
addiction.
sure it'll come. But what a great answer.
That's good then.
So the next one, can you tell me if you could deliver a driving lesson to anyone, who would it be?
Ooh. Hmm. That is such a difficult question. Because I always think, I guess the people I'd want to meet are usually like racing drivers and stuff, right?
Yeah,
But you
I
see,
mean
it doesn't mean they're any good on the road,
you don't
does
have to
it?
give them a lesson. You can just sit next to them and let them drive, maybe give them a debrief afterwards.
Daniel Ricciardo, then. I'd sit next to him all day long.
I'm guessing you're not going to be teaching too much though.
It depends how much he embraces the lesson. Gosh, that's the thing. If he's, got an open mat, he might be an F1 driver. It doesn't mean he's any good on the road. I know a lot of racing drivers. Now, they're excellent on a track, atrocious on the road. They wouldn't even pass a test now. So I'll go into it with an open mind as well and assume he's going to be really good. And if not, if I can impart some wisdom to Daniel Ricciardo, then that's my claim to fame for life, really, isn't it? If not, I reckon we'd have an absolute crack because he looks like a stand-up guy. He's pretty fit, which makes the lesson really nice for me, doesn't it? And then we'll probably just go for a pint or something afterwards. I reckon he's that sort of fella. You could just take him to the pub. We'd have a
What a
lovely
great
afternoon.
answer. So yeah, I like that one. It's a good answer. And you're right. He might need some pointers on the road.
Yeah, I'll get him to do some commentary driving, see how he gets on.
Yeah, that'd work. What a good answer. So the next one, can you tell me the best advice you ever received?
I don't necessarily think of like one specific pinpointed moment, but there's a couple of things that I've been told a couple of times. And the older I get, the more I try and embrace this. The first one is ask for help. Doesn't really matter what it is. This can relate to anything, I guess. But even throughout the learning process, there's only one way to learn, and it's learn it. Before you know it, you can't know it, can you? Do your research, ask for help. If you can't find the answer, ask somebody. There's always plenty of people out there who've got more experience. And one day you will be that person for the newbies. How would you want to be treated as a newbie? And I think that's what the more experienced people need to take on board is the same. They do the other end of it. Be helpful and be nice. But ask the questions because there's only one way to find out, isn't there? And care a little bit less what other people think. I have held myself back so much in things that I've wanted to do and things that I've done because I've cared far too much what other people think. And massive imposter syndrome over here, which I'm sure a lot of us get, especially when you first start teaching. You're like, what? Hold on, I'm allowed to do this. Um, yeah, just care a little bit less because you'll just spend so much of your energy worrying what other people think. Just do what you can do, and yeah, do your best.
I like that. There are some good points that I've tried to take on recently as well with that.
Mm.
The ask for help has always been something that I've tried to do coming from a background, but caring less about what other people think.
It's hard.
That's made
It's
it
almost impossible.
it makes a big difference once you get
Yeah,
used to it though.
definitely. And I'm not a massively confident person within myself, massive imposter syndrome, everything like that. And I'm always going to care too much what people think. That is the way I am programmed. But the more you can try not to care too much, don't let it consume you. Yeah, you'll be better for it.
Some great advice there. And you've alluded to in the podcast that you maybe don't, you're not a massive reader. But the next
Mm.
one, can you tell me your favorite book?
Driving related on or any.
Anything.
Well, I can give you a couple of answers. That
Why
seems to be
not?
my that seems I'm always on the fence, aren't I? Yeah, I'm not a huge reader. I've got a few books that are important to me or that I've needed. I just don't learn well from just read, read, read. I don't absorb the best, so I'm more practical. But I actually, sadly, I really enjoy the Roadcraft book. I think it's a really interesting book in comparison to the Highway Code. Some of it depends on how you learn. If you just read pages and absorb it, like amazing, get it read. Um, I think it's really interesting, but I would say that not because it's the most exciting book in the world, but because it's probably one of the books that I've like leafed through the most to reference things. Um, yeah, I like that one as far as driving goes, although there are others too. And I guess another book, I don't think about whether they're my favourites, but I'm thinking like, what do I actually pick off the shelf the most often? Is totally random, but it's an allotment book. There's an insight into my dull life. Um, yeah, my hobby is like gardening and all that sort of stuff. I like growing veg. So there we go. That's my exciting life now in my 30s. So I actually really like that book. It's a real escape, that hobby, from like everything that I do is cars and very modern stuff, whereas gardening's a bit old school and nice and calm and quiet. So yeah.
They're two extremes, aren't they?
Very, very much so, yeah. But that's why I like it, I think, because like gardening, it's creative, which is that just sustains me being creative in some way. And I'm always building veg beds or doing something out there that's like some zany idea, and my other half just rolls his eyes and just accepts it now. But um it's just that quiet. I'll sit with my little notebook. I'll make some plans of what I'm going to do. I like a list. I get, I think, a serotonin boost when I like to tick it off. And that's with anything in life, not just gardening. I like a to-do list. But yeah, just getting out there, and it's just a bit of fresh air. You're active because obviously doing what I do on yourself, you'll know sitting down a lot. Like I am probably a lot heavier than I when I before I qualified. um, so for me, it's getting active, having a dig or whatever else, fresh air, being in nature a little bit. And if you've got like some veggies at the end of it to show, even better. But it's just a nice, mindful hobby that you can just kind of zone out. Yeah, yeah. Surprises people.
Yeah, that's surprised me. I mean,
Yeah.
two two different books, but the extremes of what you do from racing to gardening, one's almost fast and instant, whereas the gardening, growing your veg, that doesn't happen in 3 minutes or whatever it is you
No,
do a
I'm
lap
very
in.
impatient with it. I'll plant a seed and I'm like, have you grown yet? Have you done anything yet? It's only been 20 minutes. Yeah. So it's teaching me patience as well. There we go.
Nice. Well, there's your balance. Fast
Yeah,
racing and a bit of gardening. Love it.
exactly. And then all my racing buddies would be like, have you got any potatoes or carrots yet? Like, no, that's nice. So, I'm a unique fellow.
It's an interesting combination, but I see
Yeah.
it. It's the creative side of it, isn't it? Like you've said, it's you being able to do what you want to do.
Yeah, it is really that. It's just creating my little space and yeah.
Nice answer. Next one. Can you tell me one message you would give to someone who's thinking of becoming a driving instructor?
It, I guess, goes a little bit back to the previous question, actually, about the asking for help. Um, my advice would be do as much research as you can into the pathway into it and obviously what the job entails to make sure you want to go through it and do it. Um, seek out help. Ask. There's most local areas have got like little Facebook groups or WhatsApps. Find an instructor maybe who's local who you can just chat with and ask realistic questions and stuff, because it can be intimidating when you join, for example, some of the bigger Facebook groups. When you're just starting out, it can be a little bit intimidating, and you do worry about asking silly questions and stuff. But just do your research. The internet's full of all of it. Have a look on the Gov site for all of the boring bits and all the necessities. But then look in the books as well. Get a copy of the highway code. Good Lord. Don't let it leave your side. Yeah, make sure you've got that, because it really does answer most things. But as far as learning to coach goes, if you haven't gone through a school that's providing you with somebody to sort of hold your hand through the process, find someone. Get stuck in with some local instructors, because most of us are really quite nice and we're really helpful, and we know what it feels like to be in your position. So yeah, find a friend.
Nice. Great advice. So, some more advice that I would like from you. Can you tell me
Yeah.
one piece of advice you would give a student before they go for their driving test?
There's absolutely no point in me saying don't be nervous. That's what everyone tells you, and it's nonsense, isn't it? You can't stop that feeling. Just be really honest with yourself and speak with your instructor if you've got one, hopefully, and be ready to take it. Don't rush into getting a fluke pass when you're not really at a safe standard. Make sure you're ready for your test. Basically, your instructor should help you with that. They shouldn't put you in there too early. They want you to pass. It's in their best interest that you pass. They put the work in with you. They want to share the joy at the end of it, of a pass. Yeah, just really, really be honest. Are you ready for it? And if you are, just get it done. Go for it. Because you're going to feel nervous either way. There's nothing that can change that. Bananas, whatever else, does not change how nervous you feel. So that's natural. Just do your best.
Nice. Can you tell me something you wish you were better at?
In general,
Yeah, yeah, anything.
having self-confidence throughout like everything I do, I am very naturally not confident in my own abilities at times. And it is very hard for any of us, I think, to sit and go, I'm great at that, because it's just not in our nature. But a bit more self-confidence, self-belief doesn't do anyone any harm, does it?
No, I think at times we could all do with a bit of it, can't we?
Yeah, definitely. So, like I said before, I've definitely held myself back because of a lack of self-belief. And then actually eventually gone ahead and done something. And it's not that it wasn't hard to do, I didn't have to work for it, but I've sat and thought, why did I wait? Like, why? Life's too short. Just get it done.
Nice. So that's all of the tell me questions. The last question I've got for you, is there anywhere that you'd like to send people if they want any more information about you or what you're up to?
Yeah, generally I'm pretty active on the socials, and YouTube as well. I've got the driving school, which is Teesside Driving Academy, and The rest of my sort of racing side of it is all under Sarah Hall Motorsport, and that is the same name across every platform. So that shouldn't be too hard to find.
And have you got any final messages for people? Anything that you'd like to share?
I think we've gone quite deep today.
Yeah.
We've got some good advice going out and stuff. We've got all philosophical on ourselves. I think whatever you want to do, whatever your sort of aspiration is, whether it's big, small, whatever, doesn't matter. Just do it. Honestly, it's such a cliche, but life really is too short. And I have definitely, I wish I'd done a lot of what I'm doing earlier. I don't regret it, but it would be nice to have had a bit more belief in myself and just thought, right, yeah, get your shoes on, let's go and do it. Let's just go and do it. Stop talking about it and go and do it. So hopefully everybody else can have a bit of motivation and a bit of self-belief and just go and give it a go. What's the worst that can happen?
That's it. You'll never know if you don't try.
That's it. Exactly. You can sit and wonder, or you can just go and have a go.
What a great place to finish. Sarah, thank you very much for your time tonight. I've really enjoyed the chat and taken a lot from it. Thank you very much.
Me too. Thank you so much for having us.